The mission roster was posted at 0600 sharp, right outside the operations tent. The early August heat hadn't yet scorched the Fort Bragg air, but tension simmered hotter than the sun overhead. Navy SEAL Team Echo, known for its no-nonsense attitude and deadly precision, was scheduled to deploy on a covert joint operation to northern Syria. Classified only as Operation Shadow Spear, the mission had passed through layers of top brass and intelligence channels before reaching the unit. Every name on that list had been through hell to earn their slot. Every name, except one, Lieutenant Ava Carter. The name stood out like a gunshot in a library. Captain Jared Ridge Monroe squinted at the sheet, then leaned closer. "You seeing this?" he muttered, tapping the laminated page with a calloused finger. Next to him, Mason Team Echo's communications lead let out a low whistle. "Thought this was Tier 1 only," Mason muttered. "It is." "Then what the hell is she doing on here?" Ava stood just 20 feet away, watching with quiet composure. She had seen this before dozens of times. The look of doubt. The guarded whispers. The silent question hanging in the air. Why her? She didn't flinch. She didn't need to. Ava had trained for this moment for years. Not just for the mission, but for this exact reaction. She knew the look in their eyes. She'd seen it during pre-selection, again at Sarah training, and especially after she passed advanced joint comms with the highest score in her class. Nobody ever said the words out loud, but they didn't have. 2. She didn't look like a SEAL. She didn't talk like one. She sure as hell wasn't one of the guys. But the battlefield didn't care. And neither did she. Inside the operations tent, the mission commander, a sharp-jawed Marine colonel named Duval, stood at the head of the table during the initial intel brief. "This is a high-risk infiltration and extraction assignment. No room for dead weight. You move as one, strike hard, get out fast. Echo Team will insert on the northwest edge of the compound. Lieutenant Carter will run point on Overwatch comms and SAT recon support." Ridge shifted in his chair, visibly annoyed. He wasn't a sexist man, but he was a cautious one. His team operated on instinct, muscle memory, and trust earned in the dirt. Bringing someone from the outside, someone untested by them, was asking for friction. Worse, it was asking for failure. Carter's eyes didn't leave the map on the digital screen. While Ridge evaluated her like a risk, she was already mentally walking the terrain, calculating elevation drift, line of sight angles, interference zones. She'd memorized every contour. This mission had been in her hands long before the briefing. Duval continued. "Carter's access to Tier 3 satellite overlays and battlefield recon arrays makes her vital to this operation. Command stands behind her inclusion." "Behind her back," Mason whispered. "Vital, huh? They'll be putting influencers on the team next." Ridge didn't smile. Neither did Ava. She'd heard worse. That night, as the rest of Echo Team trained, Ava stayed back in the mobile ops truck, running mock signal drills alone. She tracked her own drone feed, analyzed wind patterns for comm interference, and rerouted simulated voice traffic through encrypted paths under pressure. Not one mistake, not one delay. Just before midnight, she walked into the team barracks and found a folder on her bunk. Inside, a folded paper that read, "Know your lane." She didn't react. Instead, she opened her personal tablet, tapped in her encrypted clearance code, and pulled up the old mission logs, specifically from Kandahar, 2011, her father's last operation. She wasn't just here on her own merit. She was also here carrying a name that meant something, a legacy call sign whispered in Tier 1. Units like Folklore, Shadowbird. He had been the battlefield voice during the Kandahar ambush. The one who got Ridge and his entire unit out when GPS failed, drones were grounded, and chaos reigned. She never told anyone. She didn't have to. Ava Carter had earned her own wings, every painful, sleepless mile of them. But the name? She'd carried it quietly. Until now. During next day's pre-mission simulation, the SEALs were aggressive. They accidentally fed her a corrupted comms signal. Her screen went dark. Her feed dropped out. Mason called in fake coordinates and waited for her to panic. She didn't. Ava took a breath, recalibrated the uplink, reset the system with a manual override, and realigned the secure signal within 38 seconds. Her voice came through crystal clear. Bravo 1, you're broadcasting from a spoofed node. Reroute. Target corridor changed. Check your 6. Every man in the room froze. It was the same calm tone, the same surgical precision Ridge had heard that night in Kandahar. He stared at her, trying to place the voice. It couldn't be. Could it? Later that evening, while reviewing personnel files, Ridge paused when he saw it. Call sign, Shadowbird 2 relation, daughter of Colonel Marcus Carter, KI 2011. His breath caught. It was her. He rubbed his hand down his face and leaned back. In his chair, the voice that had once guided him out of hell, now belonged to the daughter of the man who saved his life. And here she was, right in front of him. No longer a question mark, no longer a burden, but a living echo of the calm in the storm. Ava Carter hadn't said a word during their doubts. She didn't need to, because when the time came, her voice would do the talking, and everyone would listen. The sun hadn't even cleared the horizon when Ava arrived at the SEALs staging area. Fort Bragg's runways buzzed with movement teams prepping gear, flight crews refueling, and blacked-out Humvees rolling out for load tests. Inside the hangar, Echo Team had already assembled. A row of hardened faces, battle-tested, forged in gunfire and sweat. As Ava entered, the room shifted, but no one welcomed her. Ridge didn't say a word. He didn't nod, didn't acknowledge her presence. He stood with his arms folded across his chest, jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the mission board as if she were invisible. Mason leaned over to Riker and whispered just loud enough. Didn't know we were bringing the Girl Scouts. A few quiet chuckles. No one corrected him. Ava heard it all. She said nothing. She walked past them, straight to the terminal where the tactical overlays were displayed. She plugged in her tablet, uploaded the encrypted SAT feeds she'd processed. Overnight, and since the terrain scans with drone data, no one offered help. She didn't need it. Ridge watched, silent, his expression unreadable. Colonel Duval entered with clipped boots and a gruff tone. All right, we're 48 hours out. I want complete recon familiarity, logistics locked down, and no missteps on the infiltration routes. You screw this up, people die. He turned to Ava without pause. Lieutenant Carter, show them the sweep coverage. She tapped the screen, and the compound flickered to life in 3D projection exterior walls, guard rotation, blind spots, signal towers, roof access points, all mapped down to the centimeter. I've secured access to Tier 3 satellite overlays from the NSA, she said, her voice steady. This gives us a 6-second refresh rate. Enemy patrols appear here, she pointed, in 17-minute intervals. We'll be clear if we time the breach here. Another tap, and exfil along this back corridor before their rear post can respond. The room was silent because the data was flawless. Even Mason blinked at the accuracy. But instead of complimenting her work, Ridge simply asked, "Can you keep that feed live under ECM interference?" Ava nodded once. "Yes, sir. Even under hostile jamming." "You sure?" he pressed. She didn't flinch. Yes. Ridge gave no approval. He just returned to the map. The briefing ended an hour later. The men filtered out, talking amongst themselves, some discussing gear, others taking bets on how fast the op would fall apart if Ava failed. No one said it directly, but the undercurrent was clear. She hadn't earned their trust yet. That night, Ridge called a full unit field sim. Unannounced. It was a test. Everyone knew it. Mission: nighttime hostage rescue in wooded terrain. Challenge: Ava would be solo in the mobile command truck, no backup, no prior intel, and no time to prep. Worse, the SEALs had intentionally disabled a Porsche uplink and rerouted the set signal through a dummy server to throw her off. The goal? See how she reacted when things went sideways. 20 minutes into the op, the comms blacked out. Ridge clicked his mic. Comms are down. Control, do you copy? Dead silence. The team paused in the field. A minute passed. Then 2. Then Ava's voice broke through, steady and calm. Echo team, comms reestablished. You're broadcasting through a decoy node. Redirect uplink to frequency Delta 4. Satellite grid sync now. A pause. Then everything lit up again clean. Aligned and running. She hadn't panicked. She had rebuilt the feed, rerouted it through a backup relay, and done it all under pressure in real time without help. Even Ridge raised an eyebrow. The rest of the sim went smooth. Extraction was fast, silent, flawless. In the debrief room, no one clapped, no one praised her, but no one mocked her either. That was progress. Later that night, Ridge sat alone in his quarters, reviewing the footage. He paused at the moment her voice came through the static, confident, controlled. His eyes narrowed. He remembered that voice. Not hers, exactly, but the tone, the rhythm. Shadowbird. He shook the thought away, opened her file again, and then it hit him. Call sign: Shadowbird 2, daughter of Colonel Marcus Carter. Ridge sat back slowly. He hadn't thought about Kandahar in years, had buried it under layers of dust and trauma. But now the memory played back fresh. They'd been surrounded. GPS dead, radio fried, choppers grounded. One voice came through crisp, calm, unwavering. Echo lead, shift east. You've got 30 seconds. Follow my mark. That voice had saved them. Now, years later, it had a name. And that name was Ava Carter. The girl they tried to freeze out was the daughter of the man who once pulled them from death's edge. Ridge didn't know what to do with that. It unsettled him more than he liked to admit. He didn't tell the others. Not yet. Instead, he stood up, walked into the ops tent where Ava sat alone, again recalibrating drone settings. He said nothing. Just watched her for a moment. She looked up. Something you need, Captain? He studied her, then said, no, just checking in. She blinked, surprised. Copy that. As he left, he heard her return to her work fluid and focused. He realized then, Ava Carter wasn't asking for acceptance. She was building something more powerful, respect, and soon enough, she'd earn it the only way that mattered, with blood, precision, and absolute control when chaos reigned. The next 24 hours were brutal. Ava wasn't part of the inner circle, and the SEALs made that crystal clear. She was invited to the strategy tent, but rarely included in the actual decisions. They didn't ask for her input. Ridge nodded when she spoke, but rarely responded. Mason barely looked at her. Riker and Boone acted like she wasn't there at all. But Ava noticed everything. Every map corner that hadn't been marked. Every terrain elevation misread. Every assumption they made about enemy line of sight or communications infrastructure. She didn't correct them yet. She was waiting. Let them doubt her. Let them underestimate. Doubt was fuel. Doubt, she'd learned, was the first thing that went quiet the moment bullets started flying. Colonel Duval called for a full-scale final simulation, one last test, before greenlighting Operation Shadow Spear. "Full blackout," he barked. "I want full enemy resistance simulated. No GPS, no satellite support. You'll get bad data, bad timing, bad weather, figure it out. Lieutenant Carter will operate solo in the mobile control center. No assistance. If she can't hold your link and guide you out, you fail." That was all the team needed to hear. They didn't just want to test Ava, they wanted to break her. The mock mission started at 0300. By then, the skies had opened up with unexpected rain. Thunder rolled overhead like distant artillery. The terrain, a wooded kill zone used for high-risk SEAL simulations, was soaked, slick, and crawling with role-playing hostiles, outfitted with air-powered training rifles and infrared target designators. It wasn't real, but it felt real. Ridge moved like a shadow. Riker flanked right. Mason handled squad comms and intentionally misaligned their internal frequency just before entering the first perimeter. Ava's feed, when the mission began, was already distorted. Static, then a crash, then total blackout. In the mobile truck 2 clicks away, Ava sat alone under dim red lights, staring at a screen blinking with corrupted data. Any regular comms officer would have called for help. She didn't. Instead, she pulled her own encrypted keycard, unlocked the secondary system, and accessed the legacy frequency relay, an old-school fail-safe she had personally updated during her first week. On base, within 28 seconds, she had signal. But not just any signal. She had clarity. The SEALs, still thinking she was down, began to move off course, heading straight into a zone marked for ambush. Their enemies were crouched in cover. Waiting, Ava keyed her mic. Echo led, adjust bearing 10 degrees east. You're 3 minutes from a blind side. Ridge, Riker, Boomstack formation. Mason, cut local relay interference. I'm bringing you back online. The channel went dead silent. Then Ridge's voice. Say again? Enemy presence ahead. Adjust now. You're walking into an ambush. She wasn't wrong. They adjusted and swept the zone just as 6 hostiles broke from cover. In training rounds, every second counted. A simulated failure here could have meant casualties. Instead, they cleared the area with 0 losses. From the control truck, Ava kept going. Every movement was calculated. Every second, she corrected for wind drag and terrain interference. She anticipated drone signal collapse before it happened. She didn't just react, she predicted. When the team reached the second checkpoint, Ridge spoke into his mic, low and clipped. Shadowbird, you copy? Her voice came back instantly. I'm with you. The tone, the rhythm, the exact same cadence Ridge remembered from Kandahar. He couldn't shake it now. As the mission moved into its final phase, exfiltration, under fire, the team was surrounded by simulated hostiles. Mason couldn't get the extraction bird on the radio. Weather interference was jamming up link. Ava took over. She rerouted the evac call through a commercial aviation channel, masked with military encryption, forced an override on the drone's positioning signal, and located a flat, hidden space 200 meters from the original LZ. She called it in. New. Evac point set. Bearing 114. You've got 90 seconds. Move now. Ridge obeyed without hesitation. The rest followed. By the time the bird landed, every man was dripping sweat, out of breath and alive. They loaded up in silence. No jokes. No muttering. No doubt. Ava stood at the edge of the training area, her headset still on, watching the drone feed fade to black as the mission clock hit 0. Perfect execution. The moment the debrief began, Colonel Duvall didn't bother with small talk. Lieutenant Carter saved your asses out there, he said plainly. Anyone here disagree? No one spoke. Ridge kept his arms crossed. But this time, he was listening. Mason glanced at Ava, then back down. Still no praise, still no welcome. But the wall had cracked. After the room emptied, Ridge lingered behind, staring at the mission footage as it replayed. He didn't turn when Ava stepped in. "You wanted to see me, Captain?" He nodded without looking at her. "I did." He finally turned, voice quiet. "You use your father's call sign?" "Yes, sir. He saved my team. Kandahar. 2011. "I know. You sound just like him." Ava said nothing. Ridge looked at her, studying her for the first time, not as a woman, not as an outsider, but as a soldier who just pulled off one of the cleanest runs he'd ever seen. "Why didn't you tell us who you were?" he asked. Ava met his gaze evenly. "Because I wanted to earn it myself." Ridge nodded slowly. "Consider it earned." That night, no one left another note on her bunk. No whispered jokes. Just silence and a shared, unspoken understanding. The outsider had passed the test. But more importantly, Shadowbird was no longer just a name from a legend. She was here. And they knew it. 3 days remained before deployment. Ava had passed the simulation, recalibrated the respect in the room, and dismantled doubt with performance. But while most soldiers might have relaxed, Ava did the opposite. She became quieter, sharper, more focused. In the early morning hours, while others slept or hit the gym, she sat alone at the comms tent, modifying the satellite relay codes, streamlining them, fine-tuning redundancies, preparing for real-world chaos where 1 second of hesitation could mean death. She wasn't showing off. She was preparing for war. Across the compound, Ridge couldn't sleep. Something about Ava beyond her skills, beyond her background, stayed lodged in his mind. It was that voice, the timing, the calm, under pressure. Every time she spoke into the headset, it triggered something deep and buried, the long-forgotten panic of Kandahar. That night in 2011, Ridge had been trapped. His team was bleeding out behind crumbling stone walls, radios useless, GPS scrambled. Then a voice broke through calm, level, deadly clear. "Echo lead, mark east. You've got 30 seconds. Watch your left. Go on my count. 3.2.1. They made it out. Barely. Back then, the voice belonged to Colonel Marcus Carter Shadowbird. Ridge never saw his face, never shook his hand, but he owed that voice his life. Now, he realized something impossible. He was hearing it again. He needed to know the truth. At 0600, Ridge walked straight to the satellite trailer where Ava was, fine-tuning the link to their airborne surveillance drone. She glanced over her shoulder as he stepped inside. "Sir?" He didn't answer immediately. Just watched her work flipping switches, entering long strings of encryption, fingers, moving with quiet expertise. "How long have you had your call sign?" he finally asked. Ava didn't look up. "Since I graduated comm school, it was offered. I accepted it." "Was it your choice, or did someone assign it to honor your father?" Now she looked up, slow and measured. "I asked for it." Ridge nodded, stepping closer. "Why?" Ava paused, then said, "Because it wasn't just his voice that saved people. It was how he used it. Calm in chaos. Precision when everything else failed. That's what Shadowbird stood for." She turned back to her equipment, flicked a dial. "I don't want to be him," she added, "but I want that legacy. To guide, to connect, to make sure no one gets left in the dark." Ridge let the words sit between them for a moment. He glanced at her screen, seeing the absolute clarity of her interface. Every unit, every frequency. Zero clutter, nothing wasted. He realized then, Ava wasn't living in her father's shadow. She was flying above it. You don't need to prove anything else, he said quietly. You've already got it. Ava didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence said enough. That evening, during the final full-team rehearsal, Ridge did something unexpected. He assigned Ava to lead the comms brief, not just for Echo Team, but for Allied support, evac pilots, and the QRF, Quick Reaction Force, standing by overseas. When she stepped onto the platform in the central hangar, murmurs spread. No one had seen a non-seal run point in a high-clearance pre-mission layout before. She took the mic without hesitation. Mission ingress begins at 0230 Syrian time. She began. Echo Team will deploy on foot 1.7 clicks west of the compound. Comms blackout expected within 5 minutes. I've secured a deep cycle satellite handoff to maintain coverage. Our recon drones will fly in a staggered 40-second pattern, avoiding predictable sweeps. She clicked through maps, diagrams, weather patterns, enemy frequencies, backup protocols. Every slide was tight, clean, controlled. Then came the final slide labeled simply, Contingency Protocol, Shadowbird Override. If our signal goes completely dark, Ava said, you'll fall back to grid Kilo 9. Look for Signal Boost Beacon 07. The override code is Shadowbird Prime. If I activate it, trust it without question. The room was completely still. Even Mason stopped chewing his gum. Ridge smiled just a little. After the briefing, one of the evac pilots approached him privately. That override protocol, it's Carter's? Ridge nodded. The pilot let out a low breath. Didn't know we had a Shadowbird again. You do now, Ridge said. Later that night, Ridge gathered the SEAL team outside the barracks. Under moonlight, no formal meeting, no commanding tone. Just men standing in a circle. Everyone knows Carter's history by now, he said. But I don't care about names. I care about performance. And she's proven it, over and over. He glanced around the circle, locking eyes with each man. She's not just running. R comes. She's guiding this whole damn op. From now on, when you hear her voice, treat it like mine. He turned to Ava, standing slightly behind the circle. No one here's questioning you anymore. Ava met his eyes. She didn't smile. She didn't blink. Just nodded once. The gesture was returned by every man in the circle. Mason finally stepped forward, clearing his throat. Shadowbird ... huh? He said with a half-smirk. Guess we're in good hands then. Better hands than yours, Riker added. Chuckling. Ava didn't laugh, but she didn't walk away either. It wasn't about being accepted. It was about being trusted. The night before departure, Ava stood alone on the tarmac, staring up at the C-17 that would take them overseas. Her headset rested around her neck. She watched the maintenance crews move like clockwork. The quiet hum of engines in the background. From the darkness, Ridge approached with 2 mugs of black coffee. He handed her one without a word. They stood in silence. Finally, he said, "Nervous?" She took a slow sip. "No," she said. "I've been preparing for this longer than anyone knows." Ridge nodded. "You know, he would have been proud." Ava didn't ask who he was. She knew. She looked at Ridge, steady. "He taught me that chaos is just a puzzle missing a few pieces, and that it's our job to see the whole board when no one else can." Ridge stared at her for a long second. Then, "Let's go solve it." The plane roared behind them. The mission was hours away. Shadowbird was ready. At exactly 0137 hours, the C-17 carrying SEAL Team Echo touched down on a temporary NATO-controlled airstrip outside Erbil, Iraq. The runway was dim, no overhead lights, no noise beyond what was necessary. The soldiers moved fast and quiet, silhouettes against desert blackness, their gear already prepped. They had less than an hour to transfer into unmarked vehicles, drive across the border under cover of darkness, and make final preparations for infiltration. Operation Shadow Spear was live. Ava Carter sat in the back of the lead Humvee, her eyes scanning the flickering screen of her field tablet, syncing uplinks with 2 high-altitude drones already in the sky above northern Syria. No sleep, no nerves, just the rhythm of data feeding through her fingers. Across from her, Ridge was quiet, double-checking his kit. Mason stared out the window, chewing the inside of his cheek. The others said nothing, eyes focused and still. No one questioned Ava's presence anymore. She'd become something they didn't need to understand, just rely on. 30 miles from the compound, the convoy stopped. From here on, it was boots and silence. The plan was precise. Echo Team would proceed on foot through an abandoned irrigation path to the west of the target facility. At the exact same moment, Ava would relocate to a forward mobile command post tucked into the ruins of a collapsed stone mill overlooking the valley. It was exposed, risky, but it was the only spot that allowed uninterrupted satellite access. By 02:05, everyone was in position. Inside the crumbling mill, Ava sat on a folding stool surrounded by cables, 3 screens, and 2 battery backups. Her earpiece was in, her mic live. Drones circling, signal clean. Then, movement. Shadowbird, this is Echo 1, Ridge whispered. We're at the first gate. Ava adjusted her thermal lens overlay. 5 heat signatures. Static patrol. No movement. You're clear to advance. Next window opens in 60 seconds. Number. Lights. Copy. Moving. In silence, the seals flowed forward like shadows. Ava tracked them. Heartbeats steady. Then something shifted. The drone feed flickered. The thermal overlay distorted. For one long second, her screen went black. Ava didn't curse. Didn't panic. Her fingers moved faster, switching to backup. Satellite relay. The jamming was stronger than anticipated, probably military grade. But she'd prepared for this. A week ago, she'd pre-coded a bypass using a commercial broadcast frequency, masked in data noise. No one else on base knew she'd done it. Within 17 seconds, she was back online. Echo resume comms. You were dark for 17. All secure now. A small silence followed. Then Ridge's voice came through, calm and clear. Copy. You just saved our asses. Ava exhaled, steadying herself. She wasn't in the compound, but she was already in the fight. The team moved deeper. Inside the compound, the air was thick, with rot and damp dust. Cracked walls, broken light fixtures, the faint hum of an old generator somewhere deep inside. According to Ava's satellite maps, there were 4 guard stations, 2 underground rooms, and at least 1 high-value target on site. Shadowbird, we've got footsteps above. 2, maybe 3, Mason whispered. Hold, Ava said. She tapped her drone controls, initiating a thermal sweep. Negative, just 1, stationary, likely a sleeping guard. Clear to proceed, but stay right. Avoid the second beam of light motion-triggered sensor. Inside the compound, Ridge nodded. To Riker and Boone. They split left and cleared the corridor in under 10 seconds. No alarms, no resistance. Ava kept directing. 3rd corridor splits at 90 feet. Left path blocked. Take right. Drone shows movement at lower level 2 heat signatures, armed. 1 seated, 1 pacing. Ridge responded instantly. Confirm. Pacing subject's position. Ava paused, zoomed in. 10 meters past the corner. Rifle slung. He's distracted. You can breach if you move now. A beat, then silence. Then a quiet confirmation. Targets down, room cleared. Another. Pause. Shadowbird, How the hell are you seeing all this? Ava didn't answer. She just adjusted her headset and kept watching. Then everything shifted. Without warning, the drone feed scrambled again, this time worse. A thick, crushing wave of static overtook all channels. The screen blinked violently, then froze. Ava's heart thudded once, hard. They were being jammed again. But this wasn't random. This was coordinated. Sophisticated. Too sophisticated. Ava's hands flew over her console. She bypassed 3 servers, rerouted through a civilian weather satellite, pulled in fragments of data, and tried to rebuild the map. But the compound was disappearing behind digital fog. Then Ridge's voice, cutting through faint and garbled. Shadowbird. We single quotes v ... contact. Cutoff dash need ... direct evac. She keyed her mic. Ridge, do you copy? Ridge, respond. Nothing. The silence was louder than gunfire. Ava bit the inside of her cheek, thinking fast. She tapped into a backup relay she'd buried inside. Her own field laptop one, not even the mission commander knew existed. It was risky, unauthorized, but it gave her a line straight to a third-party drone company operating in the region for weather surveillance. 30 seconds later, she was piggybacking off a civilian satellite. She found Ridge's heat signature cornered near the east wall with Mason and Boone behind him. Enemies were swarming. More than expected. The intel had been wrong. There weren't 8 targets. There were at least 20. Ava grabbed her mic. Echo 1. This is Shadowbird. I have eyes. You are surrounded. Extraction plan has changed. A long silence. Then Ridge again. Shadowbird, ... we hear you. His voice wasn't calm anymore. It was tight, pressed, desperate. You need to move east. There's a breach point 10 meters forward. I'm calling in the bird early. It's not safe. That window's 5 minutes out. I'm making it safe. Ava switched channels and activated the UAV Missile Override 1, final move she'd never used before. She directed a decoy strike to the compound's west perimeter. Just loud enough to pull. Focus. On my mark. Move. The explosion shook the whole valley. Fire and concrete rained from the sky. Inside, Ridge grabbed Mason and Boone and ran. Ava coordinated the chopper in early, adjusted for wind, set a temporary landing zone near the collapsed eastern wall. The pilot radioed in. Too hot. Are you sure? You're landing. No. The rotors screamed overhead. The dust kicked up in blinding clouds. Ridge's team burst out of the smoke 5 seconds behind schedule, but alive. They boarded fast. The bird lifted. Ava exhaled. Hard. Inside the helicopter, Ridge looked back at the burning facility behind them, then turned to the headset. Shadowbird, he said quietly, we owe you everything. Back at the ruined stone mill, Ava sat surrounded by heat, smoke, and gear covered in dust. Her hands trembled, just a little. But her voice, still steady. Just doing my job. The chopper's blades sliced through the early dawn sky, carrying the SEALs and Ava westward toward safety. No one spoke at first. Sweat, dirt, and blood marked their uniforms. Boone's arm was grazed. Mason's cheek was caked with someone else's dust. Ridge sat nearest the rear door, his eyes locked on the ground, vanishing beneath them. Ava sat opposite him, headset dangling around her neck, face blank, not from shock, from calculation. She was already analyzing, already rerunning every step of the mission in her head. Every decision, every second. What she did right, what she nearly missed. They landed at a covert NATO post 20 miles from the Syrian border. No flags, no questions. Just silence and a few nods from operators who'd been in similar fights. Ava stepped off the bird last, legs heavy from the adrenaline crash. Her gear bag was slung over one shoulder, tablet still humming in her hand. Colonel Briggs was waiting. "Report," he said immediately. Ava handed him the drive. Complete sat logs. Drone footage. Tactical overlay. "You'll see the strike. Diversion at 0314 hours. Full extraction at 0322. Briggs raised an eyebrow. "You called in the drone strike without clearance. I improvised to save your team. You used an unauthorized satellite frequency. I got them out." Briggs's jaw tightened. "You stepped outside protocol." Ridge stepped in, voice low but firm. "Sir, with respect, if she hadn't broken protocol, we'd be zipping body bags right now." Boone nodded. "She's the reason we're standing here." Briggs paused, his eyes studying Ava's calm face. Then he looked away. "Debrief at 0700. Dismissed." The team shuffled into a makeshift bunkhouse. Ridge stayed behind. He turned to Ava as the others passed through the door. "You good?" Ava nodded, but it wasn't convincing. He watched her for a second. "You saved us." "I did my job." "You did more than that." Ava looked away. "You said something." "During the flight," she said after a pause. "You said you owed me everything." "Don't." Ridge frowned. "Why not?" "Because when things go wrong next time, and they will, I'll have to make that same call without hesitation. And if I think for 1 second that someone owes me, I might hesitate. I might make the wrong choice." He stared at her, thoughtful. "You're not like any analyst I've worked with." "I'm not any analyst you've worked with." He smiled slightly. Then, for the first time, offered his hand. She shook it, brief, firm, mutual respect, then walked away. Hours later, the debrief began. The room was small. Whiteboards, screens, drones footage queued and paused. Ava stood near the center, pointer in hand, surrounded by commanders and intel officers who hadn't seen the fight, only the data. She walked them through the mission. Every corridor, every kill zone, every call. She didn't embellish or defend, just facts. When she got to the satellite reroute and unauthorized UAV strike, the room tensed. "You bypassed military protocol," one officer snapped. "You opened a back channel through a private drone network." "Yes." "Do you realize the potential compromise?" "Yes." "Then why did you proceed?" Ava looked him dead in the eye. "Because the mission was falling apart. And I wasn't about to let 4 SEALs die because your playbook wasn't written for real-time adaptation." Silence followed. Then Briggs cleared his throat. "She saved the team. She knew what was at stake, and she made the right call. That's the end of it." No one argued further. Back in the barracks, the mood was different, lighter. Boone played cards with Mason. Riker cleaned his rifle for the 3rd time. Someone passed around a bottle. And in the far corner, Ridge leaned back against his cot, arms crossed, watching Ava silently as she updated her logs. She didn't smile, but she wasn't stone either. Ridge finally broke the quiet. "You ever thought about working full-time with a field unit?" Ava didn't look up. "I thought that's what I was doing." He smirked. "No, I mean actually. Embedded, not just for special operations. Day in, day out. Riding with us. Eyes in the sky every mission." She paused. That wasn't what she'd signed up for. She was a systems engineer, a cyber analyst. She belonged behind glass, not crawling into broken mills and calling airstrikes from folding chairs. That's what the record said. But deep down, she already knew her answer. "Maybe." He nodded slowly. "Well, if you do, you've got a team that wants you back." Boone called from across the room. "Wants her back?" "Hell, I won't. Deploy without her." Laughter rippled. Even Ava smiled. Later that night, alone in the dark, Ava sat outside the barracks under the pale stars. Her hands finally stopped trembling. The desert was quiet. No buzz of screens, no static, just wind. Her tablet sat beside her dark. She could still hear the last explosion in her head. Still feel the choppers rise. Still see Ridge's face. In the flicker of the monitor, when she thought she'd lost him. Ava Carter never wanted the spotlight. Never wanted glory. But now, she had something else. She had the trust of warriors. She had a call sign that mattered. Shadowbird. And in the silence of the desert, that was enough. The weeks after Operation Shadow Spear were a whirlwind of after-action reports, intelligence debriefs, and quiet moments spent staring at screens while the team recovered. The world beyond Fort Bragg barely noticed the mission, but within the walls of Echo Team's unit, the ripples were profound. Ava was no longer the outsider, no longer the silent analyst confined to satellite feeds. She had earned her place, but the road ahead was still steep. The first order of business came from Colonel Duvall himself. Ava was being embedded permanently with Echo Team. Officially. Unofficially, she was now a SEAL Team asset, the first communication specialist to hold such a position without prior combat deployment. The news was met with mixed reactions. Ridge looked at her over the briefing table, a rare smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You ready?" he asked. Ava met his gaze without hesitation. "As ready as I'll ever be." Integration wasn't easy. The SEALs operated as a brotherhood forged in fire. Every member knew each other's moves, quirks, and weaknesses. Ava was different. She didn't share their history or their scars, but she had her own. Her presence shifted routines. She brought technology, yes, but also a new mindset, calculated, patient, and precise. At times, it frustrated the team. Boone grumbled one night during training. "Too much tech, too little gut." Ridge shot him a look. "Shadowbird saved our asses more times than you've blinked." Mason smirked, adding, "And without that tech, we're just a bunch of guys with guns." The banter was familiar. Now, Ava was becoming one of them. Their first joint operation was scheduled less than a month after her permanent embed. This time, the target was a fortified weapons cache deep in the Tigris River Valley. Intelligence suggested a heavy guard presence and the potential for multiple hostile reinforcements within hours. The stakes were high. On deployment day, Ava rode shotgun in the armored transport, headset live, eyes flicking between tactical displays and live drone feeds. The team moved through dense brush and crumbling ruins, radio traffic sparse. Suddenly, Ava's screen lit up with a new signal, a faint pulse moving fast toward their position. Echo Team, hostile fast mover bearing 215, closing in. She warned calmly. Ridge tightened his grip on his rifle. "Where?" he asked. 20 meters out. Likely recon or a sniper team. "I'm initiating counter-surveillance protocols." Ava activated an array of electronic countermeasures, sending false signals and scrambled frequencies to confuse the enemy sensors. The team halted. Seconds stretched, then silence. The enemy withdrew. Ridge let out a slow breath. "You just saved our position," but the mission was far from over. As they breached the cache compound, Ava detected multiple heat signatures inside more than expected. "Hostile reinforcements incoming," she said. "Time to move fast," Ridge replied. Inside, a firefight erupted. Echo Team moved with practiced precision, clearing rooms and disabling weapons. Ava stayed on comms, guiding movements, coordinating air support, and rerouting critical signals. When Ridge was pinned down in a hallway, Ava's voice cut through. "The chaos. Ridge, shift left. Grenade clearance in 3... 2 ... Now. The explosion cleared his path. He advanced. The operation ended successfully, but not without cost. Boone was wounded shrapnel to the leg. As they exfiltrated, Ava coordinated medevac. Later, in the field hospital, Boone gave Ava a rare smile. "You're one of us," he said. Ava smiled back, feeling the weight of belonging settle deep. Back at base, Ava and Ridge sat quietly reviewing mission footage. "Your call sign isn't just a name," Ridge said softly. "It's a promise. You carry your father's legacy, and you're building your own." She nodded, eyes reflecting the flickering screen. "Shadowbird isn't just the voice in the storm," she said. "It's the calm after." And with that, Ava Carter finally felt the last barrier fall. She was no longer just the girl they tried to cut from the mission. She was the heart of the team. The weeks after their second successful mission passed in a blur of after-action reports, equipment checks, and quiet nights spent under harsh fluorescent lights. Ava's place on Echo Team was no longer in question. She was embedded, respected, trusted, a crucial node in the team's deadly rhythm. But the war was far from over. The next operation, dubbed Silent Falcon, was the most dangerous yet. Infiltrate a heavily fortified insurgent command center deep inside hostile territory. No air support, no backup. Just Echo Team, their wits, and Ava's guidance. Preparation was relentless. The team spent hours reviewing satellite images, drone flyovers, intercepted communications, all feeding into Ava's systems. Every pixel, every sound wave was analyzed, dissected, woven into a tactical tapestry. The weight of expectation was crushing. At the last briefing, Colonel Duvall's voice cut through the tension. "This mission is critical. Failure is not an option. The intel you have is sparse. The enemy is ruthless. Use every tool. Trust in your training and in each other." Ridge locked eyes with Ava. "Ready?" She swallowed hard but nodded. On the night of the mission, the desert was cold and still. The team moved like ghosts, silhouettes slipping between jagged rocks and broken scrub. Ava was stationed again at the forward command post, her fingers dancing over her console as drone feeds streamed in live. Seconds turned into minutes. Team's every step, every breath, was tracked, guided by Ava's voice, calm, precise, unwavering. Then, out of nowhere, the feed stuttered. Static flooded the screens. Ava's heart skipped a beat. She switched frequencies rapidly. Something was jamming their signals more powerful than before. The insurgents had anticipated them. Ridge's voice crackled urgently. "Shadowbird, we're compromised. Visual contact. Multiple hostiles closing." Ava gritted her teeth, fingers flying. She activated backup channels, rerouted feeds, and initiated encrypted burst transmissions. The jamming persisted. Ava realized they were cut off from satellite support. Her mind raced. Without real-time intel, the mission was a death trap. But this was why she had trained harder than anyone. Why she'd pushed past every doubt. She switched to a secondary plan, one she had devised, but never used, a ghost protocol relying on stored drone data, predictive analytics, and team sensor feeds. "Echo Team," she said, voice steady despite the storm raging in her mind. "You're moving into dead zones. Use your night vision markers. Follow my last known waypoints." The team responded with sharp affirmations, their movements calculated and swift. Inside the compound, Ridge and his men encountered fierce resistance. Gunfire shattered the night. Explosions lit the sky. Ava's voice guided them through the chaos. "Move left." Flashbang in 3, 2, 1. The flashbang exploded, disorienting the insurgents. Ridge took the lead, clearing the path. Boone was hit again, this time more seriously. "Mason." provided cover fire as Riker dragged Boone to safety. "Shadowbird, medevac needed, now," Ridge called out. Ava coordinated the call with precision, working with pilots to navigate a tight landing zone despite enemy fire. The chopper arrived, dust and debris swirling, engines screaming. Boone was evacuated. As the firefight intensified, Ava's feed flickered. Her heart pounded. She risked everything and engaged the Shadowbird override. This emergency protocol sent an encrypted distress beacon to Allied forces and authorized direct drone strikes on enemy positions unprecedented for someone in her role. Minutes later, distant explosions echoed as drones released precision missiles, turning the tide. When the dust settled, Echo Team secured the compound. They had succeeded, but at a cost. Ridge looked at Ava, exhausted and solemn. "You did something today none of us thought possible." She shook her head. "We did it together." As dawn broke, Ava finally allowed herself a moment of relief. Her headset came off. She looked at the team she'd once struggled to be part of. Boone smiled weakly from his hospital cot. Mason clapped her on the shoulder. Ridge stood beside her. "Shadowbird," he said softly, "you're the pulse of this team." Back at Fort Bragg, Ava's story spread quietly through the ranks, not as a tale of glory, but as a testament to perseverance, skill, and trust earned. The girl they had tried to cut from the mission had become its heart. Her call sign echoed far beyond the battlefield. It was a promise, a legacy, and a beacon for those who follow. The end.